You ask what I consider my greatest work. I can name it without hesitation, but it is not one you would know, or even guess. Though my works are many and prominent throughout the land, this, my finest work, no living eye may see for 1,000 years. You must suffer to hear me tell its tale, if you are to know what it is. As you know, I was once royal sculptor, but the pharaoh whom I served longest has been purged from the official lists, and it is a crime even to mention his name. Anyone who must speak of him at all, and unfortunately, I must, may call him only the great criminal or the heretic. You know of whom I speak. Everyone does. The successor of King Nematre, who tried to abolish our gods. To this day, everyone sees him differently. His spirit looms as strangely over their minds in death as his body did before their eyes in life. Officially, no one is permitted to love him, though I know some still do, quietly, secretly. To them, his reign was a dream, a time of freedom, the dawn of a new world that was doomed to fail because of men's short-sightedness. I assure you, I am not, and was never among them. I say that not because I must. I truly detested the man, though not at first.
I would even go beyond that and say oftentimes, the art is the only thing that indicates that a civilization was ever there to begin with. Look at the cave paintings in France and Spain in the Pyrenees. We know nothing about these people's language or society or rulers if they had any. But what we have is, what they thought about the world as they expressed it through their art.
Everyone out there, we did just preview a trailer of the new short story production that we're working on. So Adam contributed a story to the latest issue of New Lyre, Thutmose, the Sculptor. And so that is a new short story production that we have going. So yeah, that's maybe something we can talk about. The only other thing I'll say maybe to preface our discussion is I think the story angle is very important. I recently posted a piece that I had penned for another my buddy's outlet, Matt Arrett, called "Ghosts in the Machine: Art, Propaganda, and the Psychomythic Wars." And it was the thesis was that the information wars of the future will not be won by who has the most information, which is the popular take, but those who tell the better stories. And there are initiatives today. Jonathan Pajot has been doing some good work on the question of fairy tales and taking back our stories. And, if we go back to Plato, the question of storytelling and myth making was seen as crucial in terms of shaping the images in the minds of man. And so I think the short story question is very important because they're very rare. They're very hard to come by, good short stories today. So our issue has a lot of new poetry. It has some cool essays, has a new dialogue, but also has a short story. Maybe you could say something about that, Adam, since we open with that.
Oh, well, okay. So the short story, it's the first I've completed in what's going to be a series set in ancient Egypt through throughout various periods of its history, ranging from the very beginning, to the very end, during almost Byzantine times. Um, like I've mentioned before, it's been a civilization and a culture that has fascinated me since my childhood, and I wanted to explore some of these themes in an ancient Egyptian setting. Really, they could probably be set. Nothing mandates that they be set in ancient Egypt. I just think it was a good backdrop for setting these stories, which deal with themes that are very much relevant today, themes of power and art and propaganda and relationships among people and culture. Um, this particular story, Thutmose the sculptor was a real person. His workshop was discovered in the abandoned capital of Akhenaten, the heretic pharaoh who closed down the temples of the gods and mandated that only one god, the sun disk, be worshipped. Husband of the famous Nefertiti, whose most famous portrait is the bust currently in the Berlin Egyptian Museum, which was the work of Thutmose the sculptor. It was found in his abandoned shop. So what the story does is it creates a fictionalized background for the bust and the sculptor and his relation to the pharaoh and to the ideology of art and artistic representation. And there's a story in there that I think is very much relevant to art today and how it's used by power and officialdom and questions of ideal portrayal versus uh, officially sanctioned styles. I'll leave it at that without revealing too much.
I mean, that's interesting. And I have read the story. It's a great story, and you've written several. So again, I mean, for people who haven't, I mean, shameless plugs all the way here. Get the latest issue, get our magazine. We have a lot coming. We have a lot of productions, and Adam's story is a singular story. The description that we used was, that you're tracing the rise and fall of Egypt through its art. That was the description that I provided, but I thought that was pretty apt and interesting, right? Because we can look at, it's not a bad way to understand civilizations, right? To look at the development of its art and culture. And if the maxim that politics is downstream from culture has any truth to it, then yeah, the culture is kind of um, it's kind of prophetic in terms of signaling where the culture is headed, and much more so than how the stock market's doing today, or how your RSP or your Roth IRA or whatever it is in the United States. I'm there are different ones, but
401k.
your 401k, right? Yeah, I knew that. Yeah, so all these things. So culture is a bit more indicative if one is prone to the more seeresque or prophetic sort of position.
Well, I would even go beyond that and say oftentimes, the art is the only thing that indicates that a civilization was ever there to begin with. Look at the cave paintings in France and Spain in the Pyrenees. We know nothing about these people's language or society or rulers, if they had any. But what we have is, what they thought about the world as they expressed it through their art. Um, we know, and art is a much more visceral way to experience another civilization than its language, even than its stories, which we almost uniformly have to know by means of translation because, who has time to learn ancient Sumerian or Egyptian or um, Maya glyphs or what have you?
Right. That's a great point. Yeah. And I mean, the theme that arises throughout our issue, or that sort of circumscribes the issue, is the question of image making. right? And I'd say that poetry is essentially the primordial form of image making. Plato talks about poesis as making, and the sister arts of imitation, poetry being the primary imitation, primary form of image making. Then you have painting, you have music, you have dance, and they're kind of all derivative in one way or another. And today there's this idea that somehow, I'd say it's a bit of a romanticized or archaic idea that poetry has less of a place in the world of modern image making, in the world of film, social media, and memes. You know, people are always decrying the state of poetry. That's always a popular take that always gets some. That's always a hot take that gets a lot of attention, which is clinically interesting in of itself. But you know, is that really true? I would argue that poetry remains the primordial sort of fount of image making. And if anything, it's the thing that can revitalize all spheres of image making today. Because, you know, if we look at film, last I checked, I mean, you know, this much anticipated Joker was finally just a mentally ill person tap dancing with Lady Gaga playing like jazz. And that kind of sums up, people are always complaining about like the number of just shitty movies, right? Shitty films and shitty entertainment. If you're going to have a brave new world where people are distracted all the time and they don't know what the oligarchs or sort of the elite classes are up to, you're supposed to have good stuff, at least to entertain people. But if you can't even provide that, and you can't provide the material security, right? The economic security that anesthetizes people enough so that they can just enjoy the slop, you know, you have a problem, right? So it seems like we're in a period where, yeah, a lot of film, a lot of culture has suffered. People are complaining about it all the time. But this is where I think poetry is actually may hold the key, because it is the essence of image making. And I think we're now on the frontier. You know, we are making films where we're integrating poetry into the storytelling, into the cinematic framework, and I think it's been very fruitful. So yeah, any thoughts, Adam, on how poetry might help us here?
Well, you gave me a lot to digest there. But you made a comment about poets lamenting the state of poetry, and it kind of reminds me, my response would be Napoleon's response to the legislature when he had his coup on the 18th of Brumaire. He basically marched in with his army and said, "Your republic's done. I'm taking over." And so one of the deputies said, "Well, what about our Constitution?" And his response was, "You destroyed it." And he rattled off the four coups that had taken place to try to prop up this government and said, "You didn't respect it yourselves, so why should I?" And that's my response to establishment poets who lament the state of poetry. You killed it by not adhering to poetic ideals, by exploring, personal identity politics or, you know, weird experimentation, occult things, what have you. But poetry at the same time, it's a little different in that it exists independent of, poets abusing it, and it refuses to die. So, it's like after a volcano erupts, you have, little shoots emerging through the blasted remains, and then eventually it'll grow into a forest. We're at the beginnings of that phase, and you just need to know, you know, focus away from the destruction and look at the cracks, and you'll see little shoots of green coming through. And I think that's what you're trying to do and what we're trying to do with this publication. And you'll find it in all the arts. You'll find it, some of it in music. You'll find it even in film. You're not going to find it in any of the theaters or on Netflix for sure. but if you know where to look, it's out there.
Amen. That's a pretty good response. We'll probably have to clip that and use that. But yeah, I mean, in the next, we have two series now. We do have the short story series, the short story dialogue series. We have a few already in the queue. These things do take time. We don't have the whole Hollywood industrial complex here that I can just delegate tasks to. It's largely just me dependent on our talented contributors and then, doing all the editing and stuff. But yeah, I do think that there are these shoots of green, if you will, these stalks of green that are popping up. I see them all the time, right? So I do think, I mean, we're going to preview some poetry. This might not be a bad segue to look at a bit of the material in the issue. But there are some talented makers out there right now, and that's why we're kind of busy developing the infrastructure and procuring the tools of power, if you will, so that these things can be proliferated and promulgated. Because if you're not getting it out there, again, that's where I think a lot of the pessimism comes from. People see good stuff, they see it's not getting this number of eyeballs that the latest, retarded Netflix series is getting, and they're like, oh, all of civilization is stupid. The take from younger people today is that everything is fake and gay. That's what they say. So they're and it's like,
And it's I sympathize with them.
yeah, you
If you just took a surface survey of everything, that's the same conclusion I would draw. That was the conclusion I drew, 15 years ago when I first started, writing and composing. I thought there was nothing. And the key to it all is just making connections. I'll never, not to make this personal, but I submitted, a single set of poems to you. What was it, 7, 8 years ago, something like that, and it
where does
grew
the
into
time
a
go?
collaboration, and it's things come of that. When you live in isolation, everything seems desperate. But there are people, there are groups out there who feel the same way and are doing something about it. So yeah, again, to reiterate, look past the big picture and focus on the details, and you will see signs of hope.
Amen. And yeah, I do think a lot of it is, yeah, it sounds almost cheesy, like you're not alone. But I mean,
Well, yeah.
people need to hear that all the time, every day. And so, hey, we're saying the same thing. A lot of people need to hear. So yeah, let's open it up. Let's cover a bit. I mean, do you wanna? Yeah, Adam, why don't you pick one that you like, one of the poems? The other stuff is longer, and it's gonna appear in productions and audiovisual montages and such. Uh, but yeah, pick something that stood out.
Let's go to, this would be page 128. Sorry, I gotta do it on my PDF here.
Yeah, that's fine. Why 128?
Yep.
Oh,
This is by Patricia Falanga, who I think is from Australia. Is that right?
yeah, her 128. Her bio reads, I haven't spoken to her in person or over the phone, but Patricia Palanga is a poetess hailing from Australia. She is well versed in languages and literature as diverse as Italian and Sanskrit. Ooh. She also is an accomplished musician and composer. Her poetry is unique for its personal vision, expressing contemporary diction and traditional forms.
There we go.
And yeah, she has a lot of nice little gems. So yeah, absolutely, Adam, go for it.
All right. This one is called Sonnet for a Gnarled Olive Tree. Old spirit, born of ancient loam, but wrenched and torn to foreign soil, Your very roots and branches toil in mindless longing for your home, where Hesperus spreads a golden wing, bids nymphs and legends to awake, with Venus and her maids to make the slopes of Etna laugh and sing, where almond blossoms scent the air with bouquets that intoxicate, and you so heedless of your fate, were once so lithe and youthful there, yet stubbornly you daily strive among our eucalypts to thrive.
So yeah, olive trees are not native to Australia, I take
You
it.
know, and this one spoke to me. Maybe perhaps it comes from her perspective as well. It's hard to tell from her last name, but and maybe you too, as a member of the Italian diaspora, it sort of, harkens back to your ancestors' land. And, what does it mean to be living here? You're fully part of this country, but you still have roots, you feel every now and then to another land. We're talking about where the olive tree comes from, where it belongs, the slopes of Etna, the almond blossoms, um, the Roman gods, Venus and Hesperus. And yet we're in this other continent among species that are completely unrelated, and yet we thrive here, in this new land. So that's where I read this from a, you know, personal and a, cultural perspective, and if we want to make this wider, what that speaks to wider things, what does it mean to be, uh, a member, of a people, of a culture, and is culture confined to just, the area where it originates, or is there something it can take across the world, and thrive in, foreign environments?
Mm. The word that comes to mind is a geography of spirit, right?
There you go.
Yeah, because it actually made me think of a poem that I've liked. I don't know if I'm going to pick the same translation I read before, but there's a famous poem written by an Andalusian, a Moorish poet about the palm tree. And a palm tree. It's by Abd al-Rahman. So Abd, the red, al-Rahman, I think no, it's not the red actually, but he
Al-Ahmar is the red.
it's something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Ahmar is red. So
Ahmar is red, yeah.
yeah. So this is a famous poem from an Andalusian poet. The only Christmas gift I got myself is it's a new book of Andalusian poems. Usually when I get that's been a recurring gift. I try to find better translations of the same stuff. It's taking like 2 weeks to be here. But so this reads, a palm tree I beheld in Arusafa, far in the west, far from the palm tree land. I said, you, like myself, are far away in a strange land. How long have I been far away from my people? You grew up in a land where you are a stranger, and like myself, are living in the farthest corner of the earth. May the morning clouds refresh you at this distance, and may abundant rains comfort you forever. Translation's okay, but it conveys that same spirit, I think, right? So this is an Arab poet in southern Spain, and he's musing about the palm tree and the displacement. There's a beautiful tension there, right? Because there's a physical tension in terms of distance and geography, but spiritually there's something that endures. So there's a certain sovereignty, I would say. And that's always interesting. That the irony is that while people in those positions will often lament that, in terms of the cross fertilization of culture and the kind of unique combinations that arise from that, it's usually quite interesting. We were talking when I was in Italy, and I did a little trip to get a translation of one of your ancestors' books of poetry. We were talking about the Anglo-Italian community, right? So Shelley had settled in Italy at a time. Byron had settled in Italy at a time. Byron had written a drama on the fall of on the only Venetian doge that was overthrown. And there's this beautiful confluence of English and Italian culture that was really a thing. And I mean, Rome definitely had an influence on Shelley, right? And I mean, when Keats was dying and he needed a respite from those the misty, rainy northern climes, he went to Rome. So there is a rapport there, and it produces interesting results. So it's nice to see
And
today,
Goethe spent time in Rome as well.
right? And so I'm not sure where Patricia Falanga. I don't know that Australia is where she was born, but she seems to have settled, and she's writing some beautiful stuff and doing something pretty interesting. So shout out Patricia. And yeah, I mean, we have a lot of interesting stuff in here. I guess I'll go now, and we'll just go back and forth here.
Sure.
Something that stuck out to me. Okay, you know what I'm going to do? I do like a good compare and contrast. So I'm going to read something by Rachel Landrum Crumble, who I believe is in Tennessee, and she's got a great voice. She has an original and truly singular voice, and there's always something memorable about what she has to say, which is often directed to herself. So it seems, which is always useful, or it makes it easier for, I think, the reader to receive what she's saying, because she is kind of talking to herself all the time, it seems. So this is called Imperatives for a New Culture chapter. Sorry, Imperatives for a New Chapter.
What page are you on? Just so I can...
33. And I'm going to compare it with something different after, and then we can just...
Bless you.
Thank you. It's winter here, so it does happen. We're cooped up.
All right, gotcha.
So, Imperatives for a New Chapter by Rachel Landrum Crumble. Avoid self-loathing before breakfast. Trot out your anxieties before noon. Wear them out and put them down for a nap to afford you some afternoon peace. Fend off the habit of catapulting yourself into someone else's head. It's like trusting Google Maps for directions to an obscure destination with a common name. Keep yesterday behind you to avoid going in circles. Nibble on beauty all day, like fresh peppermint leaves for an upset stomach. Believe in God, who answers the heart of foolish prayers. Today, if you don't have strength to plant the garden, at least play in the dirt. You may find treasure, a sequin from a forgotten custom, mining the memory of a childhood parade. I think that's beautiful. There's something, though it makes, in a certain way, the last lines, you may find a treasure, a sequin from a forgotten costume, mining the memory of a childhood parade. Was it not Wordsworth? The child is the father of man, right? And C.S. Lewis, among others. Wordsworth, I mean, a lot of his poetry was dedicated to kind of the nostalgia of childhood. But C.S. Lewis made the point that the childhood isn't really the thing that people want to regain, but there's something about that joy or that innocence, that beauty, that sort of direct, unadulterated experience that people want to get back to, which gets harder as all the film and filters of different things and the different internal voices that kind of accumulate over time. And so how do you break through that? And I mean, there has to be an inner voice, really, that only your own inner voice can break through that. And so the way I see her poems, she has several here, and I've read her other poems, and they all kind of do the same thing, is that these poems are addressed to that inner voice. And she's addressing it to her own inner voice, but it's because it's done in an authentic way. I feel it resonates with everyone, and that's why Wordsworth's poetry resonated with everyone at its own level, and that's why a lot of the naive poets, as they're called in the proper sort of Greek sense of the word. Yeah, so I thought this is very beautiful.
Well, the sequin that you mentioned, it's notable that she says you may find treasure, a sequin. Now, to anyone else, it is a treasure because of what it means to you. To anyone else, it's just a piece of, that came off clothing or something that you could throw away.
Your Jack
But
and the
because it's
Beanstalk.
associated with that experience you have, that's why it's treasure, because the treasure is really within you. It's the memories you hold of what that is associated with. And in a sense, that's kind of what poetry is.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, it's in a sense, it's I'm kind of a Leibnizian, so I like to think of least action pathways, and this is kind of a least action pathway to getting at a certain purity that we all know is there. And I mean, the lesson from C.S. Lewis as well is that the childhood itself is not the thing that is to be pursued, right? Which is kind of, that's actually on a comedic level, that's the riff that I often go back to, which are these riffs by Tim Dillon about the kind of Disneyfication of culture, where there's adults going to Disneyland, and there's a whole even younger people today, they're in like university and they miss high school, right? They feel like they peaked before they were legal adults. And
That's I know people with white hair who still reminisce about high school as their peak.
oh, of
It's
course, oh, yeah, no, don't. So the lesson though is that it's not that thing. If you went back to those things, to that childhood state, you wouldn't get the thing that you're looking for. So all these things are kind of shadows. They're intimations. I mean, Wordsworth in his later days, right, or in his better days, I'd say, his more mature moments, had intimations, an ode on intimations of immortality, where he sort of recognizes that, yeah, there are intimations of something deeper beyond just like wanting to return to childhood or wanting to return to this idealized past. But these are good guides, they're good predicates, right? They're sort of good devices to imagine the kind of thing that you do need, right? You do have to have that childlike joy. I mean, was it is Jesus himself, right? He was saying, if you wish to enter the kingdom of heaven, right, you must become like these children, right? There does
and
have,
he doesn't say become children, he says become like children, which speaks to, it's not the childhood itself.
but there's something to learn that we forget. And so to remember that thing, that primordial memory, if you will, is profound. And I do think poetry, yeah, a lot of poetry sort of has to do with getting us back to this primordial essence, and because it brings real joy. So this is why I like Rachel's poems. Shout out to Rachel. And I will contrast it with something else, which at this point might be a bit, I think it'll be, this is darker. I should have probably started the other way around. But this is by one of our recurring contributors, I just feel the two should be contrasted since our issue is pretty diverse.
Mhm.
So Tom Merrill, our recurring Schopenhauer, who is heavily featured in this issue again. Oh, this is page Adam 26.
Okay.
It's called a demural. I learned a new word and I like it. So yeah, shout out to Tom for teaching me a new word.
That actually
He,
has a in legal terminology in the old common law pleading, if someone brought allegations against you and you challenged or you asked to dismiss the case, it was called a demurrer. You would demur to it, and in some states they still have those.
Interesting. So let's see what his demural is. So Tom Merrill, who describes himself as Tom Merrill forgets time by forging facts into words. Tom Merrill, shout out to our buddy who is a character by any stretch of the imagination. He writes, "Why keep your senses grounded here, or let them have you sharp and clear, who wakened you to numbered days, to yoke you to their futile ways, while tickings winch you nearer toward your execution and reward. Why not imbibe or pick your trip? Let them ram home the standard script as you, absorbing what you like, risk transport on a one-way flight. Let our grand architects complain who pull their mighty weight in vain, only to end as they began, fragile freight of a circling hand that flicks the feeble out and in, and each back to his origin." I would say this is a Carpe Diem poem. This is a take on Carpe Diem in a very original way. Why not imbibe or pick your trip, right? But let them ram home the standard script. So there is a sort of anti-authoritarian take here, which you always need some of that, right? And that's kind of how I feel about you always do need some of that. Uh, I don't know that I co-sign the whole carpe diem ethos, right? I feel like it can be easily abused, I guess is my main reservation. But it is interesting, and Tom has a lot of interesting takes, and he's very feisty and cheeky, and he's very artful. So I do appreciate his talent, and yeah, I'm happy that he any thoughts
Oh
on
no, and I don't think he crosses that line into hustle culture as they call it. I mean, this is a very measured carpe diem. Um, the line that still sticks out to me is yoke you to their feudal ways. It's sort of if you don't chart your course, someone else will chart it for you. And it won't necessarily be a place you want to go. Um, Not necessarily anti-authoritarian. Well, it is in a way, but not stubbornly so. I mean, I don't. You call this a little darker. I don't see it as it's dark in the sense that it recognizes that there's um what's the word I'm looking for? A malevolence out there. Um,
right?
but it's showing you a way around it. A way to self-actualization, self-fulfillment, in a non-self-help guru sort of way.
Right. Well, it does have this kind of Bukowski-esque
Mhm.
appeal to it, though I'd say Tom is way more talented than
Well,
Charles
yeah, I mean,
Bukowski.
this
Truly.
is a poem.
There's no comparison. Tom is, I mean, for all the Bukowski fans out there, I mean, Tom is like Bukowski on steroids. Is the Da Vinci of Bukowski's. He's
There you go, like that.
yeah, no, shout out to Tom. I have to give him a call to wish him Merry Christmas, actually. That I do want to do that before the 25th. Well, no, but I've spoken to Tom as well, and yeah, no, he does have his own thoughts, is I guess what I'm trying to say. And but no, Tom has a lot of memorable lines, which I think is that's always a mark of a true poet, right? I mean, if you read again, folks, get the issue. I mean, there's a lot of this is our biggest issue yet. There's over 150 new poems. So I mean, this is winter is long, and so is this issue. So if you get it, winter may turn out to not be so dark and cold.
We
But
can
no,
tell
yeah,
you live in Canada.
yeah, no, there's no escaping it. So yeah, those are mine. We could go on for a while, but yeah, Adam hit us with something, and I do want to blow my nose. There's no way around it. But yeah,
Okay.
say something. I'm listening.
Okay, let's go to page 98. This is We Never Met Each Other.
We Never Met Each Other by James
It's
Nicola.
Nicola, yes.
Okay, you said 98. Okay. James Nicola, I mean, little bios. James B. Nicola's nonfiction book, Playing the Audience, won a Choice Magazine Award. Recent nonfiction can be found online at several publications. I won't name them all, but including High Met Review, About Place, Mr. Beller's Neighborhood. And yeah, he's won a bunch of awards, Storytellers People Choice Award, a Best of Net, and a Riesling Award nomination, among others. Happy to feature James's poetry. So you said we never met each other.
Correct. I guess I have a thing for sonnets, but this is another sonnet. We never met each other, but I thought that you might like to know that if we had, I would have been very good to you, not that absent you I've been entirely bad. But nothing has inspired me to be good, particularly, or no one, that's life. The road I didn't take, the one I should have taken, would have led me to a wife, like you, or you, in fact, for whom I would have been strong, true, brave. But what about you, in whom I'd have had faith, but never could have known for sure? So what was I to do? I couldn't help but take the road I took, foreseen by fate, then blazoned in a book.
Interesting. The sonnet. I mean, nothing like a good sonnet. It always
Yes.
gives hope.
And then the nice thing about this too is it makes frequent use of enjambment. So the sonnet form is really masked. And in fact, the turn is sort of delayed. We have the ellipsis in the second line of the sestet, which presents us the turn. So it's a little delayed. It's a sonnet with enough twists to make it not seem like a standard Petrarchan sonnet or Shakespearean, I guess is
Yeah.
well what it would be.
It ends. So what was I to do? I couldn't help but take the road I took, foreseen by fate, emblazoned in a book. Interesting. Interesting.
And this is and I see in this a nod to Robert Frost, help but take the road I took. Two roads diverged in a yellow woods. But this is sort of this isn't about the choice. It's about the choice. The choice you made as part of fate. We never met each other is the title. If things had gone differently, if fate had led me to you, who knows, you would be my wife and I would be strong and brave for you, but here we are and we never knew each other. Um, which explores that interplay between, is it destiny or is it decision?
Right. No, that's interesting. Yeah, it's true. It's no shout out to James. And I mean another one that treats this, I guess I'm not a nostalgic guy, and yet I seem to be on the nostalgia train with these. But I guess it's because I like the way they certain poems and certain poets can handle the question of nostalgia, which you can't sentimentality. And maybe you can chime in here, Adam. I mean, because Schiller, German poet Friedrich Schiller, classical poet, has a famous essay on naive and sentimental poetry. And sentimental has a specific connotation, but I think when we say something is sentimental today, it's usually it's not the most it doesn't have the most positive sense. I don't know that it's derogatory, but sentimental is kind of like a bit mushy or so. I do think good sentimentality has a role where you can displace yourself and think back or imagine yourself in another time and reconnect in a way that does something special and elicits or awakens certain memories or ideas that are useful in the present but that require you to transpose yourself. That's kind of in a better sense how I think about sentimentality, but that's not the typical definition, right, for today.
No, no, it isn't. In fact, I would say sentimental, I think, is derogatory more often than it isn't. And when you say sentimentality, I've almost always seen it used in a derogatory sense.
So let's let people hear this poem and maybe they can chime in. You guys can always comment, right? I mean, comments are welcome to comment. This is Friday nights at the bowling alley. I'm at least old enough and thankful enough that we did have nights at the bowling alley. We did not have screens back in the day. We still just had flip phones, and so I do have those memories of nights at the bowling alley. And so this is by Chris Wood, who explores the intersection of memory, history, and identity through a lens rooted in faith, language, and place. Her poems have appeared in American First Magazine, Salvation South, Monterey Poetry Review, and numerous anthologies, including Women Speak 2025. Friday nights at the bowling alley. I really like this poem. In the days of cigarette vending machines and pinball arcades, I spent many Friday nights with Dad and his Shriner friends. By day, and even some nights, my dad worked on furnaces, but once a week, he took off his work boots, slipped into a pair of bowling shoes, and let loose to have a few beers, eat Limburger, which my mother would not allow in the house, and bowl strikes down the alley. I acted as server and gopher, earning quarters and candy bars by pulling packs of cigarettes from vending, getting drinks from the bar, and keeping score of every strike and spare. I miss those preteen years when the air smelled of smoke and Old Spice, when pins crashed like thunder and laughter spilled down every lane, when his bowling buddy pulled quarters from the back of my ear. I and all of these men, I thought, would live forever. That's beautiful. I love that. Am I alone here? Is that there's a charm to this. I mean, this is nostalgia done right for me.
Oh, for sure. Particularly because it touches on so many things that have been lost in modern, especially American culture. Are you familiar with the book Bowling Alone?
No, but I've heard of it. It rings a bell.
Yeah, it was ahead of its time, really. It was a sociological study. I have a copy of it here, written in maybe like 1998, 2000, sometime around there. And it talked about just the disengagement of, you know, people from organizations, and the decline of bowling leagues was symptomatic of this, this atomization and isolation that, has reached epidemic proportions today. And I think, talking about a bowling alley as a kid, I'm old enough to remember before the scorekeepers were even computerized and it was an overhead projector. You had to fill out the paper with pencil and it projected on there. And then they were always crowded and you'd have league nights. Um, I had a secretary once who was in a bowling league and, invited me to join them, and it was all people in their 60s and 70s. And,
Yeah.
um, it's not something you see really anymore. So,
Right.
anyone who, grew up, I don't know where, Chris is from. The reference to Limburger leads me to think like Wisconsin, maybe, but anyone from, who grew up in the Midwest, knows about, the bowling league. The bowling alley was a fixture. And they're still around, my kid has birthday parties there, but, it's not what it used to be.
Right. I mean, this makes me want to go to bowling alley at this point. So shout out to Chris.
Yeah.
No, yeah, no, and it's exactly that. And right, that type of person that was there, the way the memories are elicited, and there's sort of the precision with which she's tugging on the heartstrings is itself art, right? It's almost like a Beethoven, like there's a compositional sort of tugging of heartstrings. And so you have to be a real poet if you can do that in a way that, you know, elicits all those emotions and yeah, takes you through the whole thing and transports you, right? It puts you in a different place by the end. And that's, I think, a successful poem, right? There we've come
Oh,
closer.
yes. And that's what's so masterful about this too. It's a personal experience. A lot of times, poets write about them. I get, and I wrote a piece about this. You get frustrated about poets writing about themselves. Oh, I remember this. And it becomes, why should I care? Well, this doesn't wax, if metaphysical about, the meaning of this, but presents a very personal, snippet of her childhood, but all of us immediately know why it's relevant, and we immediately are drawn to it because we share in this experience.
Yeah, and I'll go further. I think somebody who reads this, let's say in 100 years, who's never heard of bowling, will just be at will be asking, "What is bowling? And can we do it? Where can we find this thing?" Right? That's kind of, and that's how you know you have a good poem. So shout out to Chris. I really like that, and all her poems have the same quality of effect in a different way. So yeah, I was very surprised because I only got to read a lot of the poetry in this issue once I got the physical issue. So yeah, I'm surprised as well. You know, I was overseeing a bunch of different things, so I trusted Bob, our poetry editor, and he made some good decisions. So Adam, pick one more. I'll pick one more, and maybe we can yeah, we can we'll close it out.
Okay, I have a couple good ones to
And
pick
yeah, maybe
from
you
here.
can throw in one or two, right? You don't have to just stop at one. Poet of the
All
Spring,
right.
you had Orion Shoots.
Yeah, before Orion, that's actually the one I was going to go to. Before Orion shoots his bow by Gary Bills.
Page.
132.
Okay, take it away, Adam.
Okay. Slender fingers break the sky. Go stir the hours you've loved so far. and constellations drifting by, and freezing ponds that held your star. Go touch the nitrate through the glass, and touch the mirror's image too, and let the seasons promise pass. Old lights, new lights will shine for you. Go find the steady April plow before the waking of the bee, before Orion shoots his bow as winter quits the naked tree. So, Orion, this is, first of all, it's a very musical, we're in rhyming quatrains,
which I like.
iambic tetrameter, which it has a very musicality to it. Orion famously is a winter constellation, but we have a song about the spring, again, a sort of carpe diem message. Spring is coming, let the past season go by, look forward. And we sort of, I love the mirror imagery, the stars being reflected in the ponds, touch the mirror's image, touch the nitrate through glass, touch the mirror's image. Um, you know, we're,
Right.
what I read into that is what's reflected back at you, um, is, it's your perception of yourself too. It's your perception of things, not just reality. Um, and then at the end we have, go find the steady April plow, before Orion shoots his bow and winter leaves. We have, look ahead, spring is coming.
Yeah, no, and you're right. Go touch the nitrate through the glass and touch the mirror's image too. And let the season's promise pass. Old lights, new lights will shine for you. Embrace it all, right? Is kind of the message that I get, which is, yeah, it's done in a very beautiful way. Yeah, that's very nice. And contrast or second one that you would like to in tandem with this one?
Let's
Gary.
do.
Gary, and while you look for that, Gary Bills was born at Wordsley near Sturbridge, UK. I know they have special pronunciations half the time. He took his first degree at Durham University, where he studied English. It goes on for a while. His work has been translated to German, Romanian, Italian. He's won various prizes, including the Bill Winter Award for the best short poem. Right. He is the editor of Poetry on the Lake, I believe. Shout out to
Yes. All right, so the other one I will pick is it's on page 113. It's Teoria by Quentin Peralta Greeno.
and
Sorry if I
that bio. Yeah, I'll read that bio right away because I found it interesting as well. Quentin Peralta Grinnell is a Byzantine Catholic residing in Toronto. He's not so far from me, and shout out for Montreal. With his wife and family, he's a doctoral student in political theory at the University of Toronto. More of his prose and verse can be found at hoping-for-clarity.blog. Interesting. And you said Theoria.
Yes.
Take it away.
Your eyes that look beyond mine own, mere dye and egg upon bare wood, reveal all that cannot be shown, beauty giving the true and good. Mere dye and egg upon bare wood, to what do figures still attend? Beauty giving the true and good, with you the past and future blend. To what do figures still attend? Both here within yet to transcend. With you the past and future blend, yet here you stand as if a friend. Both here within yet to transcend, reveal all that cannot be shown, yet here you stand as if a friend, your eyes that look beyond my own. So this is a pantoum, which is a form. I've seen more of these, surprisingly, but it's it's a very difficult form to pull off successfully because it alternates repeating lines between stanzas unchanged. Um, the name comes from a Malay funeral song where the refrains are repeated in this series. And I believe it was the French who first imported it into Western idiom. Um, traditionally, it's sort of a funeral dirge. It has a sense of solemnity about it,
Um,
which this does. And, we're talking about, I think that Byzantine Catholic deal or detail rather, in his biography is important because I see this as particularly with the Greek title, I see this as about an icon. Um,
right.
Die an egg upon the wood.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm
you
pure.
know, it's yeah, here we have the artwork conveying a sense of something greater than the image itself. And we have that closing line. Here you stand as if a friend, your eyes that look beyond my own. Um, not only is the speaker beholding the image, but we have the image beholding not just the speaker, but everything. You could say it's transcending time and space. The icon will outlast the viewer. It will outlast, and certainly the idea behind it will outlast everything. And this sort of ties in with the idea behind the short story and poesis in general is we have the artwork becoming something more than just a work of human labor.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, that's a beautiful analysis of a beautiful poem. And Quentin has uh, provided several poems here in this latest issue, and yeah, no, he's definitely interesting, and I hope to get to know him more. And yeah, it's always interesting, right? You read, obviously, I'm sure I'm not the only. When you read interesting poems, you're curious about the person after. You're like, who is this person, right? So I'm curious about Quentin at this point. So that's shout out to Quentin, and yeah, no, very interesting. And I think that's not a bad place to actually end, because there are 150 plus poems in this issue, which again, guys, we're going into 2026. We have a lot of productions and things to do. The minimum, getting the physical copy, becoming a subscriber to Age of Muses, that is going to help us actually have the firepower to do a lot of stuff that we'd like to do in 2026. And there is so much. I mean, as much as I think we covered some interesting poems, Adam, but we could still,
And
there's,
I'll just add the poems we picked were especially selected for podcasting format. They're shorter, um, just to allow for time. There's many very good longer
yeah,
works in here that just didn't lend themselves well to the format we're doing.
yeah, this is our biggest issue. I mean, we've had, so this is the latest issue we've had in the most recent ones were the fall 2024 and the winter, the summer, spring 2025. This is winter 25, 2026. This is our biggest issue to date. And there is so much stuff. I mean, new short stories, new essays. We didn't even get to talk about Carrie's essay.
Yeah, I was just going to say we should put a plug in for the essay about Shakespeare's Troilus and Cressida.
Yeah, so maybe
Uh,
let's just plug the things that briefly. Yeah, so if anything, Adam, on that,
oh
Carrie.
yeah, it's a very good. It appeals to both those unfamiliar with the play and those who may have studied it. It's a very in-depth analysis of the tragedy. Um, but how it's atypical of Shakespeare's other tragedies and really a unique work. And what I really like about it is it goes through the reception to the play throughout um, history and how really um, So a lot of, I can't remember if it was Samuel Johnson or someone from the 18th century, called it a mess basically, and how critics and poets alike, crapped on the work throughout history, but how really that reaction is unjustified, and the play really presents, worthwhile analyses of, power relationships. Um, I thought it was very insightful, and I had read the play before, and I want to read it again now after reading the essay.
Right. And yeah, I mean, just to be clear, so this is Carrie Job's essay on one of Shakespeare's lesser appreciated and least performed of all his plays, Troilus and Cressida, which is a story, I guess, within a story, you could say. It's a minor story in the Iliad, I believe, right? Troilus,
Yes,
one of Priam's many sons, and
I
his
think the youngest son, I believe.
yeah, and yet this story was recast by Chaucer. It was recast by others. I mean, it's Troilus and Cressida. I mean, it's an important theme, and the bard himself treats it. And it's the bard, for me, what I also find interesting is the bard himself, Shakespeare, treating a Homeric theme. How does the Prince of Poets himself, Shakespeare, or the modern Prince of Poets versus the ancient Prince of Poets, treat a Homeric theme? There's so many possibilities. And as you said, Adam, this question of power and how to treat power, you're seeing how Shakespeare treats the question of power. And in some ways, it might be his most candid or one of his most candid plays. And maybe that's why people don't like it, right? Because
Hmm.
he's kind of just telling you what he thinks, and it's less romantic, it's less glorious than the Homer that we're used to, or the Iliads that we're used to.
Or the Shakespeare that we're used to also.
Yeah. So that alone is worth it. And we will be having a discussion with Carrie at some point. So there's a lot here. And we figured, with the holidays, we may as well discuss a bit of what's coming out. And so, yes, Adam, we're going to be featuring your short story soon. I'm all hands on deck for this. It'll kind
Well,
of
I'm
be
excited to see it.
Yeah, it'll kind of be a vacation for me. I just get to work on, producing the story, and I'm not going to worry about other things. That'll be my vacation. So yeah, thank you, Adam, for joining us. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and we will be back again shortly. So happy holidays, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.